Hello.
Hi! You're listening to Filmies Chats, and a very special episode of Filmies Chats. I'm Shelby Cooke, the editor-in-chief and head curator at Film East. You'll probably have heard my voice before. But today we're going to take you on an odyssey of red carpet interviews, celebrity Q&As, and tales from beyond the TIFF Film Festival. After that very dramatic introduction, this episode of Filmies Chats is one of the special episodes that we do every so often. You probably would have heard last year, Neve Brooke and I did an episode during the London Film Festival. We talked about some of the films that we had seen and gave some chatty reviews and talked about the festival overall. And then Will Schofield and I, earlier this year, did an episode looking at what we were hoping would be the Oscar nominees. Some of them we did predict pretty well, I think. But essentially it was more of an episode of some of our favorite films from 2021. But this special Filmies Chats episode is just going to be with me. Sorry, you just have the American on this one. But it's a very exciting and unique episode. A couple of weeks ago, I got on a plane and headed to Ontario, Canada, as I was accredited press at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. This was my first time at the Toronto Film Festival, but obviously the festival itself has such a reputation for being one of the best, if probably not the best, film festival in the world. I think probably if I were to rate it on the festivals of the world, I think Cannes is probably going to be the most prestigious, you know how the French are. And then Toronto, I would rank it as probably the second most important film festival. So it's always been a dream of mine to go to TIFF. I think it's something that I would always just expected to go more as like an audience member. You know, nothing really too exciting, but I've always wanted to experience that atmosphere of TIFF. And then this year, I just, on a whim, not thinking anything of it, because I did not think, in fact, I was going to get accepted as press. I applied for the press. Again, not having any expectations, fully not expecting to get it. Just thought, oh, this would be a great experience. I can see what the application process is like, and then I can get my rejection letter and move on. Fortunately for me, I was not rejected. I think it might have been a mistake, and they let me slip in there. But, you know, okay, we'll take it. We'll take our wins where we can get them. So I took my little self, and I went to Toronto, and I saw a bunch of films, and I had probably one of the best experiences of my life. I think as someone who, I don't really consider myself a journalist. I'm much more of an academic. If you don't know that by now, listening to these podcasts, I'm very theoretical. I like to theorize about films. I'm not a very practical journalist type person. So to have this opportunity that I had to go to Toronto and like work the red carpet and have interviews on the red carpet and to have all these exclusive access to some of the most famous people in the world was like kind of crazy. I sat in a press conference with Harry Styles. Like, the Harry Styles. It was wild. Like, I still can't quite believe it. Definitely didn't have as much pizzazz as he did in Venice, but it was still very surreal. So essentially how this episode is going to work is I'm going to be constantly narrating throughout all the different clips of the content that I have from Toronto. We're going to first start off with the red carpet interviews and some of the people that I talked to on the red carpet, and then move into the Q&As that happen after some of the movies. I will suggest that if you do not want to be spoiled in terms of the movies, probably not to listen to the Q&A section. Essentially how these Q&As work is everyone in that cinema literally just watched the movie, and then the cast and crew come out and you can ask them questions about the movie. So a lot of the Q&As are very spoiler heavy. They're very detailed about the plot. So I would recommend skipping them if you don't want to be spoiled, or just to come back and listen to this episode again after you've seen the film and you want to hear what Sam Mendes and Olivia Colman have to say about Empire of Light. I will put a disclaimer out there before we move into any of the interviews. The audio quality is not the best. Okay, this is Filmish Chats, right? Not NPR. And again, this was my very first time working a festival as press. All of the press accreditations that I've had at other festivals, particularly the London Film Festival, have always happened during the pandemic. So this was my first time actually being at the festival and seeing all of what happens behind the scenes. So I did have a learning curve that I had to go through. I think towards the end of the festival, a lot of the audio quality did get better, but it's not the best that it can be. And I took some tips from the things that I learned this time around, and hopefully if I get accredited again next year, I'll apply those things so we can have crisp, clear sound of famous people talking. Anyways, let's get into the interviews. So on the first day of the festival, I was approved to do 2 red carpets. And the first one was The Lost King, which is a new film by Stephen Frears. I will say, I was extremely nervous. This was the very first time I was ever going to talk to a celebrity. Celebrity being, i.e., Steve Coogan, Norwich icon, we all know it, and Stephen Frears, British cinema icon, as the big British cinema nerd that I am. So I was very nervous. I didn't know what I was doing. Luckily for me, luckily or unluckily, depends how you see it. Luckily for me, I was in what they call the media pen, with standing to my left was BBC News, iHeartRadio, Sky News, and then Film East. So I think I was going to be a little overshadowed in this particular media pen because there was a lot of people there who wanted to talk to Stephen Frears about his movie The Queen, and unfortunately the passing of Her Majesty the day before. So everyone wanted to get those sound bites to put on the news. And then I was there. And I was just trying not to pass out. So before I start playing the interviews, I'll give you a little bit of background on all the films. The Lost King is Stephen Frears' newest film, which retells the story of how an amateur historian, who's played quite beautifully by Sally Hawkins, battles skepticism and bureaucracy in a quest to locate the final resting place of King Richard III. We've all heard that story of how a king was just found in a car park, buried under the ground. That was a very iconic story, and it is that story. And it's telling the story of the woman who was in charge of the research and the dig to find Richard's body. I do have a full review of the film over on the Film East Instagram, so that's at films_east, and that's films with an S _east, where you can also find all of my other Toronto Film Festival reviews as well. So I'm not going to give you my reviews in here, but you can go read them over on the Instagram. Film stars Sally Hawkins, Steve Coogan, and Harry Lloyd as ghostly King Richard III who haunts Sally Hawkins. So there's this sort of mixture of magical realism and this play on history and the idea of how history is written. You'll hear in the clips, what you won't hear in the clips. We'll start with what you won't hear in the clips. I did get to talk to Stephen Frears, but Stephen Frears showed up to this red carpet ready to cause chaos. This man was giving nothing. He was serving absolutely nothing. He was going up to every journalist and just mumbling. He was not there to talk clear words, okay? He was just mumbling away. He was not giving a hoot and holler about talking to anyone. He showed up and he's like, I'm not going to talk to anyone. But I did get to ask him a question, and it was actually very hilarious, his response to it. And I would play the clip of it for you. But again, you have no idea what he's saying. You cannot understand a word he's saying, because he just decided that on that day he did not want to pronunciate any words ever. So it was really quite hilarious. I asked him about sort of the magical realism that happens in the film. And he said, oh, never thought about it like that. And then just walked away. So very insightful. Great conversation I had with British filmmaker legend Stephen Frears. I got to speak with Jeff Pope, who is one of the screenwriters. He also was the screenwriter with Steve Coogan on Philomena. So it was great. It was quite nice. He gave a very nice answer to the question. And then, so I'm going to play that for you, and then followed by that is a conversation with Steve Coogan. Unfortunately, Sky News next to me was hogging up all of Steve Coogan's time. And I can't be mad at about that because it is Sky News. And the lady was very, very nice. It was her first time doing a red carpet too, so I just let her have it. So you'll hear some random other woman's voice asking the questions to Steve Coogan. That's not me putting on an English accent. It's the Sky News journalist who was asking him the questions, and I was just happy to be standing there. So please enjoy this conversation from the red carpet with Jeff Pope and Steve Coogan, screenwriters of the new Stephen Frears film, The Lost King.
Quite interested in what seems to be like a lot of magical realism that's happening in the film. Yeah. How do you sort of combat that, the history with sort of the fictional in order to make it entertaining as a film?
One of the key parts of this story is how Richard III is perceived by history, and that has been dominated by William Shakespeare's version of his life in Richard III. And the most interesting thing very early in the research was I'd kind of assumed that Richard III was contemporary, that Shakespeare was writing about contemporary events. He wasn't. He was writing about events that happened 100 years before. So all the people involved were long gone. And he was essentially regurgitating Tudor history. So the Tudors won Plantagenets, lost, and so the Tudors consigned Richard to the dustbin of history. So here's a film which not only asks questions about that version of Richard, was he evil? But it also celebrates the achievement of a middle-aged housewife, divorced mother of two from Edinburgh, who would not give in, who would not say no. And one of the central parts of the film is the appearance of Richard himself. We thought long and hard about that. And the reason we did it was it came from somewhere. It wasn't pure fiction, a figment. Well, it's fictional, but it wasn't coming out of thin air. Philippa, during this process, would have an internal imaginary conversation with Richard III at certain points. You know, what would you have done here, and why did you do that? And we realised that in the form of Harry Lloyd playing Richard. And so Philippa has a conversation with him, but really she's having a conversation with herself, with her own psyche. So it was to help open that up and explain to the audience what was going on in her head.
Good luck with the premiere tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Huge congratulations on the film premiering here. Is it become slightly bittersweet being here with everything that's going on in the UK at the moment?
Well, it's a very odd feeling. I only found out about the sad news of the death of our Queen when the plane landed. So it is very odd. It does feel strange, surreal to not be, in Britain at the moment, because there is a sort of a universal respect for the Queen. I think that crosses all the normal divisions in Britain with regard to all the things that the great work she did and the dedication of 70 years from the age of 25 till 96. She subjugated herself to the service of her country, and I think it is a sort of a strange moment, a very sort of defining moment, I think, for Britain. And like I say, her uniquely, I think, her status as like a sort of a widespread respect. And but I'm going back tomorrow night, so I'll be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with my fellow countrymen.
And from one monarch to another, did you when the kind of headlines were swirling around the story of the king in the car park, were you thinking then, "Oh, this would be perfect for a movie"?
Well, it wasn't so much the discovery of Richard III. I mean, of course, I knew Richard III, like most people do, from Shakespeare's play, the sort of hideous, evil, nefarious figure. But it was Philippa Langley's story that I found compelling, and the sort of the marriage of her struggle, and the fact that she was judged harshly, with the fact that Richard III historically has been judged quite harshly, and so really to me it was her journey as an amateur, sort of a David and Goliath story of her pursuing her intuition and her instincts with a sort of an intellectual tenacity. And she was vindicated, but it's really it's her story, as much as Richard's.
Do you sort of feel at this stage in your career, I'm just thinking because you just that show Chivalry as well, are you kind of wanting to kind of push the agenda for other people, like getting her story told now?
It's very nice. It's much easier to, rather than looking for a sort of a vehicle for myself to be a writer, producer, and try and tell other people's stories. And we're sort of quite privileged, Jeff and I, who are two white middle-aged men, that to get to tell a woman's story, which we did in Philomena, and there's a sort of similarity to the story of Philippa Langley and the Lost King. That's also a story of a middle-aged woman's struggle to find her voice, and so that's and there's a great deal of satisfaction in pursuing a project like that rather than some sort of vanity project.
Brilliant, lovely stuff. Thank you so much.
Is there anything about sort of the magical realism that you have going on in the film that the combination between fiction and reality?
My stride.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't as frightened as you.
Okay, so I did include the Stephen Frears bit at the end because it is just very funny. And I think that he says at the end, "I'm not as bright as you are." So I don't know if he was making fun of me or I'm just really clever. So I'll take that as a win for me. The next carpet I did was for Frances O'Connor's world premiere of Emily. Emily is a boldly atmospheric portrait of Wuthering Heights author Emily Bronte, the directorial debut from veteran actor Frances O'Connor, and it's a tale of creativity, secret desire, and a woman's arduous journey towards self-actualization in 19th century England. Unfortunately, I didn't get to actually see Emily while I was at the festival, but it surely does look like an incredible film. It stars Emma Mackey from Sex Education, most notably, and Oliver Jackson Cohen as sort of the love interest across from Emma, who plays Emily Bronte. So as the synopsis sort of said, this is Frances O'Connor's first film as a director. And I really did want to talk to her as a first-time female filmmaker. Unfortunately, I didn't get to talk to her on the carpet. She was just very busy talking to other people. But I did get to talk to Emma Mackey, who was a very charming and lovely woman. She was very sweet, as well as Oliver Jackson Cohen, and the producer for the film, Piers Tempest. I think me and Piers had a very good conversation. That was definitely the longest one from this carpet. And he gave some good advice and some good suggestions. So now we're going to lead into the red carpet for Frances O'Connor's directorial debut, Emily.
Are you excited to screen your film for the first time with an audience?
Yes, I am. We only watched it with crew and amongst ourselves, so it felt very private and intimate, and now we're going to share it with the world for the first time, so I'm very nervous, but I'm excited for it to be let out into the world.
What was it like working with Frances? I mean, I know this is her first time as director, but
Yes.
It's also that element of her being an actor. What did she bring anything different to sort of the set and to the atmosphere of the directing?
Yeah, I mean, she's so she has lived with this script for so long and for a decade, and she's been, it poured her heart and soul into it. So it means a lot to her, and you can tell. I mean, every scene she directs, any moment, any breath is so precious to her, and it's really wonderful to have a director who cares so much. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's true, and to have someone who is really fighting for their vision to be seen, and yeah, it was really special, and to have someone so sensitive to all those little details, and who knows what it's like to act, and obviously she had an incredible acting career, so the trust was there. Yeah.
What was it like taking on such an important character like Emily Bronte?
What was it like working with you?
Yeah, what was it like working with Oliver?
What was my favorite part of what? Sorry,
what was it like embodying Emily Bronte? She's such an iconic woman.
Yeah, she is. But then because there's not an awful lot about her, and I did as much research as I physically could, and I read all the books that Frances sent me. But because it wasn't a biopic, I had to just trust the script and follow the story and run with that, and use that as my base and as my foundation for the whole thing. So, she was, and is in the script a tour de force, and there's a lot to explore and uncover, and hopefully we can manage to do that and bring her to life and make her a little more human and tangible, because she's the woman shrouded in mystery, that Emily Bronte. So it's good to bring her to life.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing the film, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you excited about seeing the film the first time tonight?
I've already seen it.
Oh, you have?
So there's always something awful about watching it for a second time.
Okay.
You start to pull it all up, well, yourself.
That's true.
Apart.
Yeah.
But I'm quite excited to see it with the audience and all the bits I missed the first time.
Amazing.
I'm excited.
What was it like working with Emma?
Oh, she's phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but
I haven't
is
seen
like,
it yet.
oh my god, it is like a it was so electric when we were doing it, and it's so alive and complex and ugly and it's all of these things. It's such an incredible performance, and just working with her and going to work every single day with her, I am her biggest fan.
Amazing. What was it like working with Frances? I know this was her first time as a director. What was like the chemistry on set? How did the process go?
Well, I mean, Frances, because she wrote it as well, so she had such a clear idea about what she wanted, and I think that and it was her first time directing. She did it with such ease and confidence, and it was a tight schedule. She made it work. And I think as well, working with a director that is also an actor is, I think, for an actor is there's a language that she speaks that is there's an understanding in the language. So it was a really incredible experience working with her. We worked together 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
On a TV show, and she told me 10 years ago, I'm thinking about writing something about Emily Bronte, and here we are.
It was manifested. It was meant to be.
Crazy,
All right. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy your second screening. Hi, Piers. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Is this your first time seeing the film tonight?
It is. I probably my about 50th time seeing the film tonight.
So
yeah. I've seen a lot. The first time with a public audience.
So that's always a new atmosphere, new energy.
That's why. I'm quite nervous about it tonight. But I think it's a great place for it to screen. I mean, I can't,
What was it like collaborating with Frances? This was her first film, director?
It was. Well, I knew it was because Frances had written the script. It was such a great script. I mean, she just knew it intrinsically. The story, how she wanted it. The clarity of vision was extraordinary, basically. So I knew as a producer, it's like all I had to do was try and deliver on that vision, because it's going to go with it. And she'd speak, because she, especially the writer-director, and coming as an actor, she just had it in her head. So it's in a way, it's quite sort of straightforward creatively to produce it, because it's just like going with Frances's vision. I'm like, that's what I was sold into.
Yeah. How do you keep something like Emily Bronte, who's been done so many times, especially like Wuthering Heights? How do you make that new and original and exciting?
Well, this is a movie. Because the film is the imagined journey of Emily writing Wuthering Heights. So it's not meant to be a documentary. It's not meant to be factually completely accurate. It's loosely based on the facts, but it's Francis's interpretation of the story. And I think that's what makes it interesting and so fresh. And what the film's done is it's really, I don't know how, but what we've done is it feels very modern. So we're not explicitly trying to be modern, but it just feels, it's got that feel where it's accessible for the sort of all ages, the younger age. We really wanted to inspire sort of teenagers and to be to be creative and be their own people, and you don't have to be judged by Instagram and social media. You just want to do your own thing, which is really what kind of Emily did.
Yeah, that's a fantastic segue. I work a lot with young people who are starting out in the industry. What sort of advice would you give to someone who is just about to start off? Maybe they want to get into the producing role of movies. Where would you tell them to start?
I would tell them to start. I think it's film is storytelling, so it all starts with a great story. And I think I always say to producers, people who want to be producers, just produce. I mean, now it's quite easy to start with camera, friends, just do it basically, and then try and do that on your own, and at the same time work on bigger movies basically, and then just so you've got both. And then just trying to build your creative group of contacts and peer group, and it's all about relationships, and it's a people business.
Yeah.
So you kind of, I think you've got to just do it. Don't sit. No one's going to come and hand it to you on a plate.
Yeah.
You've got to go and kind of go and create. But it's a great. I think for content, it's a fantastic time to be going and to be building.
There's so many different ways you can get into it.
There's so many different ways to go, and it's a boom. It's certainly in the UK.
Yeah.
It's really busy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of streamers and the cinemas coming back. It's a good time for content creation. But it's got to be. But I suppose flip side is there's so much of it. It's got to be really, really good to
make an impact.
To make an impact.
Yeah.
But certainly, it's always difficult, but it's a great time to be coming in and it's vocational. So it's a vocational sort of industry.
Well, thank you so much, and enjoy your screening, and hope you enjoy it with the audience.
Yes, thank you.
I did forget to preface this before the recordings, but there was this very charming moment when I was interviewing Emma, and Oliver came over and interrupted it. It was quite cute. It felt very like a movie star moment. It felt like something that, look at how charming these cast members are together. They're so cute. They're so quirky. They're flirting. So that was sort of the interruption that you hear in the middle of Emma's interview. So if you were wondering what that was. Moving on to the next two carpets. Those are the last two carpets that I did at the festival. I was on the carpet for Empire of Light, which is Sam Mendes' new film. But unfortunately, I was all the way at the back of the media pen. But everyone at the front of the media pen was asking very long questions and taking a very long time with all of the cast and the crew. So I didn't get any interview footage from that carpet. I was really kind of quite disappointed, but if you keep listening to the second part of this with the Q&As, I do have the Q&A from Empire of Light included in that section. But the final two red carpets were things that I truly was manifesting for myself. I was truly hoping they would happen, but also a little part of me was like, let's hope they don't happen, because I don't know how I will handle this situation. And one of those things was the red carpet for Joanna Hogg's new film, The Eternal Daughter. If you know anything about me, I love Joanna Hogg. I think her films are so brilliant. The Souvenir, both part 1 and part 2, I think are just masterpieces. The Souvenir part 2 is so magical. It's just, I had chills, goosebumps. Like, I felt like after I finished watching The Souvenir part 2, I was like, this is cinema. Like, this is cinema. So I really, really love Joanna Hogg. And she's definitely my favorite filmmaker. And I think she's one of the best British filmmakers currently working. I think she's very underrated for sort of this very interesting undertones she has in a lot of her films. I think she's sort of, from my perspective, she's creating this sort of new wave of British cinema, which is like so exciting. So before I get into my detailed explanation of what happened on this carpet, because it was very exciting, just to give you a little bit of background on Joanna's new film called The Eternal Daughter. It is a haunting mystery from director Joanna Hogg, which stars Tilda Swinton in a mesmerizing performance as a woman forced to confront past memories while visiting an eerily empty old manor. In this film, Tilda Swinton plays to herself. She is both stars. And that just goes to show she's that powerful. But what's really quite exciting about The Eternal Daughter is it follows the same characters that are introduced in The Souvenir. So Julie, who is played in The Souvenir by Tilda's daughter, Honor. And the other character is Tilda's character, Rosalind, from The Souvenir, again played by Tilda. So Tilda plays, in this movie, Julie and Rosalind. So it's pretty much just 2 hours of Tilda Swinton talking to herself. And it's very mesmerizing because it's Tilda Swinton. She can do no wrong. It was a very brilliant film. It's Joanna Hogg. Of course, I love her. It has these elements of the ghost story. It's essentially like a ghost story type of film. And I don't have a review out for this film yet, but it will be coming for the London Film Festival in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that. But anyway, so I was back to the Harry Styles. I was sitting in the Harry Styles press conference. I was checking my email after Harry Styles' film, which is another film that is on our Instagram. And after the film, in between the film and the press conference, I checked my email and I got this lovely invite, specially for me. Hello, Shelby. You are invited to attend the red carpet for Joanna Hogg's film, The Eternal Daughter. Now, I thought I was being punked, because when I left for Toronto, I said, there are going to be 2 things that I will accomplish. I will find Joanna Hogg, and I will interview her. And I will find Paul Mescal, and I will die. Those were the 2 things that I was going to accomplish while on this trip. So I got this email, and I was like, excuse me? They're like, Joanna Hogg and Tilda Swinton are both going to be there. You're welcome to come to the red carpet. Please email us back as soon as possible. Spaces are limited. And I was like, oh my God. Harry Styles has nothing on this right now. I was like, I have to email this woman back. I emailed her back so fast. I was like, please let me know if there's any more spots. I would love to do it. Absolutely, I would love to do this. And she's like, great, come to the TIFF Lightbox at whatever time it was, like 5:30 or something, to do an interview, and be on the press line. So, afterwards I talked to Harry Styles, whatever, forget about him. That's not important anymore. It was time for the carpet. I was so nervous. This was the most nervous I was the entire festival. I was so nervous to talk to Joanna Hogg. I included my very awkward and embarrassing introduction of myself to her in this clip because it's very embarrassing and it's very funny, but I think it's very cute and it's very nice. I do think I scared her with how intense I was. I was like, my name is Shelby Cooke and I am your biggest fan. I reached out my hand and I forced her to shake my hand and I said, I think you are a genius of cinema. I went there and I used the word genius. So I think that intimidated her a little bit, that I thought so highly of her films. I was so nervous. My hands were shaking. I couldn't hold. I had a camera as well as my phone, and I couldn't hold both of them. I was shaking so bad. I was so nervous to talk to her. But she was very nice, and she did accommodate my questions. I think she's just a very introverted person. So it was, I think maybe my golden retriever energy was just a little too much. But then after that, so I got to interview her. That's the first clip that you'll hear in this section. And then after that, Tilda Swinton was right next to me. So she was interviewing with the guy that was next to me, and her publicist came up and said, sorry, we can't do any more interviews. At this point, it was just me and this other young girl. We're both pretty young. And it was just me and her left at the end of the carpet. And the publicist said, sorry, like, we have to go into the film. You can't give any more interviews, Tilda. And Tilda wasn't having any of that. She completely ignored this woman. She came, she stood right in front of me, looked me dead in the eyes. And I said, can I ask you at least just one question before you have to go off? And she's like, absolutely. And she gave me 100% of her attention. And she gave me a full answer and didn't, wasn't like brushing me off because I was at the end of the carpet and I was, no one important. She was treating me like I was the most important person there. And then after that, her publicist says again, it's time for you to go. And she just moves right on to the next girl and answers all of her questions too. And I think that was just the most incredible thing ever. I have always loved Tilda Swinton. I love that androgynous woman. But now I love her even more. I was like, this is truly a person with a good heart. Like, this is a person who, she's not, I think Tilda Swinton is one of the most famous people in the world. Like, to be one of the most important and influential actors of your generation and to have been in as many movies as she has been in and worked with as many people as she has worked with, to just stop and give me 100% of her attention and act like I was the most important person there and that she really wanted to answer my questions was so incredible. So I have so much respect for Tilda Swinton. I think she is just the most marvelous woman. I definitely didn't scare her with my golden retriever energy as much as I scared Joanna. And I really do apologize, Joanna Hogg, if you are listening to this. I do apologize for being so intense, but I was very excited to meet you. You were my Harry Styles in that moment. And then, funnily enough, the next day, I was going into the toilets and I was turning the corner, and just as I was turning the corner, Joanna Hogg was also turning the corner, and we literally ran into each other. And I felt like in that moment I should have said, oh, I'm so sorry, like, if I, like, I didn't know what to say. I should have been like, oh, I'm so sorry if I, like, was too over the top yesterday, but she probably didn't remember me anyways. I'm sure I wasn't the first person who forced her to shake my hand. But now that I've told you my whole life story, do please enjoy now this interview with Joanna Hogg and Tilda Swinton for Joanna Hogg's new film, The Eternal Daughter.
Hi, my name's Shelby. Nice to meet you. I just want to say I'm a huge fan of your films, and I think you are one of like the biggest geniuses in British cinema in recent years. So I just wanted to say that I'm very excited to be able to be here and to see I saw your film this morning. So I'm quite interested. I'm quite a big fan of The Souvenir, both parts. What made you want to return to these characters, to Julie and Rosalind, and continue to tell their story in a way that's not really a continuation of The Souvenir, but in a different sort of situation, different time period?
Yes. Well, actually, it wasn't quite like that, because even before I wrote the two souvenirs and made them, I wanted to make a story about a mother and daughter going away on a break to a hotel. And in 2008, I was thinking, actually, before I made my second film, Archipelago, and I made Archipelago instead, I didn't feel ready to make something that was loosely based on my relationship with my own mother. So that had come about much earlier. But then what changed after The Souvenirs is how Tilda portrayed Rosalind and how moving that was, and how moving it is to see a woman of that generation who grew up in the Second World War navigate life. So Rosalind sort of came out of The Souvenirs into The Eternal Daughter. But of course, since you've seen it, it's not the third part. It's not Souvenir 3, maybe it's Souvenir 6. But it's very much its own thing. It's got it's a completely different modulation. It's playing different music.
I'm quite interested in how you sort of subvert genres. I think, especially with like The Souvenir, you subvert the British social realism genre quite well. And then with this one, you kind of tackle the horror element and ghost stories. How did you go about creating this film, and how did you play with the genre tropes that are already there, and did you kind of bring your own flair to it?
Yeah, well, it took a lot of thought and watching a certain number of, not so much horror films, because it's not a horror film, it's a ghost film. but watching films by Jacques Tourneur from the 50s, a film like Night of the Demon, but also The Innocents with Deborah Kerr. So there were a lot of films in my mind, but I did feel a responsibility because I hadn't tackled genre, in this direct way before. So I felt like I'm moving into this area where there are a lot of people who love that genre, and do I have to play the same games? And I realised I could sort of envelop myself in that genre but do my own thing.
I think you succeed in that as well. So,
Thank you.
So what's coming in the future? Do you have any ideas of future films?
I do, and I might be moving into another genre.
Okay.
But I don't know yet. It's very early stages. But actually, having made these 3 films in quite quick succession, and having read them, of course.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice
Enjoy
to
the
meet you
premiere.
too.
All right, so you're playing the older version of the role that your daughter played in the Souvenirs.
Yes.
What was that process like? So, did you work with your daughter a lot? Was there sort of this eternal daughter coming together moment that you guys had?
I know my daughter very well, as
Yes.
you might expect, so there was no working with her, but I knew, the Julie she creates with Joanna is not Honor. It's really a specific person, and so that was the person that I was working with. But there were all sorts of details of the way she holds herself as Julie, and little details like the way my daughter holds her pen when she writes, which I kind of drummed up into it. But no, Julie is a particular person, not Honor, not Joanna either, somewhere in between, and now I'm mixed in there as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see, I saw the film this morning, I can definitely see that play between Honor and yourself and how you brought Julie back to life. So, fantastic job. It was a fantastic film.
Thank you very
much.
Sorry, we have to log.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Don't we just love Tilda? Absolute icon. I am obsessed with her. But now moving on to the final red carpet interview, which wasn't actually supposed to happen. But I am a woman on a mission. Returning to the 2 things that I was going to accomplish at this festival, I was on a high. I was like, I interviewed Joanna Hogg and Tilda Swinton. Nothing can stop me now. So I thought I could accomplish my other goal. Probably not of dying when I see Paul Mescal, but I was like, I'm going to interview Paul Mescal. So I met one of the women who run the red carpets at the Joanna Hogg premiere. And she's like, oh, just let us know. We're the liaison between the press and the film. So just let us know if there's anything that you do want or anyone that you want to talk to or anything. And I was like, oh, yeah, there is someone I want to talk to. So she told me where Paul's, he wasn't doing a red carpet, so it was just a photo call, which is essentially just for the photographers to take pictures, and then a lot of times they get like their Getty images and stuff. And so I went to that. I was like, I will pretend to be a photographer. I'll get my picture of Paul Mescal. It'll be very exciting. And then I saw this other girl who was standing there. She had another press pass, and she went up to him afterwards and was like, can I ask you like a few questions or something? I was like, no way is this girl about to be the only person who gets an interview here. I was like, I'm going to do it. And I know this might be hard to believe. I'm not a very confident person. I am a very shy, introverted person, but I was possessed by my love for normal people. By the trauma that normal people has bestowed upon my life, to walk myself over there. And I sort of like barricaded both him and his publicist in, because I kind of like stood to the side where I was like, neither one of you are leaving until I get what I want. So I was kind of just like, after that other girl finished, I was like, oh, I'm also pressed. Would you mind if I asked you like a few questions or something? And his publicist was like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, Film East. You don't know? How embarrassing for you. But she let me, and I asked Paul some questions, and it was surreal. And just like that, I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish at that at the festival. So I pretty much forced Paul Mescal to give an interview to me, and I don't feel guilty about that at all. It's a cutthroat world out there. You have to be out there getting the interviews that others can't. That's how this industry works. This is what the listeners here at Film East Chats want. They want to hear from this very attractive Irishman. So before I play the clips, I'll give you a little bit of background on Paul's new film that he has coming out. It's called After Sun. It's directed by Charlotte Wells. She's a Scottish writer-director. And this is her feature debut, which is actually so impressive because this film is so meticulously crafted and so well made. It's almost hard to believe that it is her debut feature. It brims with warmth and quiet wonder as its protagonist, who is an 11-year-old girl, recalls a father and daughter's journey to a Turkish seaside resort some 20 years after the fact. After Sun employs the gentlest touch, yet leaves an indelible mark. And that is very true. Paul plays the father Callum in the film, and his daughter is played by Frankie Coro, who is 11 years old and was an absolute spitfire. She wasn't at the screening, but her performance in the movie, so incredible. It was obviously because she's 11, she's not thinking too much about like her character. And I think, again, that pays tribute to Charlotte's ability to work with young actors like that, and to get a performance out of them that is as good as that was. Really just incredible. I was so impressed with it. So now please enjoy my 2 minutes in heaven with Paul Mescal.
So essentially, like, my first question would be inspiring young people. You're still pretty young yourself and you're in the early stages of your career. What advice would you give to people who wanted to get into the industry, either as actors or producers or directors?
I think it's really hard to not sound like twee when you say things like this, or when this question's asked, but it's about kind of working harder than people around you, the things that you can work hard at. And if that is about rehearsing really hard to get in, rehearse your audition for if you're going to go to drama school, or read plays, or watch films, watch them and read them with intent. If you like to do the basics and do them well. And they all sound like cliches, but I think they kind of are cliches for a reason to a certain extent.
What are you hoping your career to go from more forward? Because it's already had a great start.
Yeah, much of the same. I'd be happy with. I think it's just about focusing on the work, making the right decisions, and working with filmmakers that excite me. Yeah.
What do you want people to take away from After Sun?
I want it in an ideal world to force an audience to be slightly more introspective and examine their own relationships, not only with their father but with their parents. And yeah, it's a tricky one to describe. I just want people to see it and have whatever response they have to it.
Amazing, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Who else here loved Normal People? Who else here has been inevitably traumatized by the television show Normal People? So that's going to conclude part 1 of our TIFF special podcast. Those were all of the red carpet interviews that I did while at the festival. But part 2 is going to be longer Q&A sessions with some of the cast and crew of the films that I saw there. So we have Richard Eyre's new film called Alleluia, which includes Richard there, as well as his main producer for the film and his main actor. We also have a Q&A from the cast and crew of Empire of Light, which is Sam Mendes's new film. So that features Olivia Colman and Roger Deakins, an absolute superstar. Just the coolest person ever. And then finally, we'll end it off with some more Paul. We have the Q&A after the film from Charlotte Wells and Paul Mescal for After Sun. And it's actually a very good Q&A. It was very in-depth and it gave a lot of context to the film. But like I said in the beginning of this episode, do be advised that there are a lot of spoilers in the next part. So listen with caution. Either listen now and don't be worried about being spoiled, or come back later once the films are out and listen to it then, and you can get some insights from the cast and crew. So that now concludes part 1 of Filmish Chat's special presentation at the Toronto International Film Festival, and join us in part 2 for some cast and crew Q&As. Bye!